The last structure by Candela that I will describe in detail is the Bacardi rum factory. But to describe the Bacardi rum factory, I have to explain a little bit about the St. Louis Airport Terminal, designed by engineer Anton Tedesko in collaboration with architect Minoru Yamasaki. Candela found out about the St. Louis project when he attended a conference at MIT in 1954 on thin shell structures. He actually went there with the expectation to learn something from others, but found that he was actually way ahead of everyone else. And during this time, as I mentioned, he learned of this collaboration between Yamasaki and Tedesko to build the St. Louis Airport Terminal, and they were having some issues. This terminal is designed to be a groin vault, similar to the vaults I showed you earlier by Candela, except for it's not intersecting hyperbolic paraboloids. This time, it's intersecting cylinders, meaning there is a single curvature. There is not a double curvature to this shell. Tedesko wouldn't permit the structure to be designed without stiffening ribs, which, against the architect's wishes, in the end was done. So if you go to the St. Louis Airport Terminal, you will see at the very edge of the shell essentially a beam that runs along there, and also at the valleys, at the groins of the shell, you'll see a beam sticking up above the shell. From his experience, Candela knew that the circular cylinder was the wrong form for this project, and that hypars would be the solution. By intersecting hyperbolic paraboloids instead of cylinders, that would give the shell curvature in two directions and the stiffness that would be needed to perhaps avoid these ribs. An aerial view of the St. Louis Airport Terminal, you see very clearly these ribs that are there placed along the valley of the shell. Candela said that in the next opportunity he had, he would redesign the St. Louis Airport Terminal, and he did with a Bacardi rum factory in 1960. You can see the visual differences between the two, a very clear expression of thinness with the Bacardi rum factory, and you can see very clearly also it is a remake of the St. Louis Airport Terminal. 3 vaults were built in 1960, and about 10 years later, another 3 vaults were added. In aerial view of the space, we see not only the 6 vaults, but the many umbrellas that Candela also designed as part of this project, where barrels of rum are stored. The vaults actually are lifted up by what I call feet. These feet are 2.5 meters tall, and next to those feet you see a scale factor to give you the sense of how high this vault rises off the ground. On the inside space, we see the enormous barrel vault in the context of the space. We see the imprint of the formwork, indicating again the straight line generators forming the hypar shape. And also we see that there's no lights on. And even in a somewhat cloudy day, there's significant natural light that floods the space. Let's zoom back now to examine a structural artist and who is a structural artist and how is he or she defined. So a structural artist has talent in design for minimum materials. The structural artist has a builder's mentality to search for minimum cost and also a strong aesthetic intention. A master builder, in contrast, has the first 2 characteristics, but he or she doesn't necessarily have to have that aesthetic intention. So that is the difference between the master builder and the structural artist. Master builder is a term that's used quite often. Structural artist is something that is relatively new, a terminology put together by David Billington as part of his scholarship, and something that we use throughout the course. So this slide shows you a clear distinction between these 2 words, structural artist versus master builder. For a master builder, we came up with a new alliteration. They conceive, they calculate, and they construct. In other words, they conceive the form of the designs, they perform the calculations, and they plan and direct the construction. So let's look at how Félix Candela was a master builder in this context. The way he conceived the forms of his designs was through the geometric form of the hyperbolic paraboloid, and we've seen examples of that. There are many more examples you could look at. From the calculations point of view, Candela preferred the simpler calculations, although he did validate them with the more complex ones. And he also preferred experimental validation to validate the hand calculations that he was making. Candela did have an opportunity to come to Princeton a few times and give guest lectures, and here is an image of Candela at Princeton giving a lecture to our students with Professor Billington in the foreground. And from the construction point of view, we see how he carefully planned and directed the construction. He used straight line generators so that he can use straight pieces of wood, and he also reused that formwork, and that was another way to achieve economy of construction. Finally, we can reflect on Candela's evolution of design. He began by imitating, recall how he began by imitating the umbrella form by Aymond, a Frenchman, in 1936, but he took this form of the umbrella and made it more elegant. Then he innovated, finding that free edge, finding a way to make this high par shape with curved edges free of continuous support, and he did that with a few projects culminating in his inspiration, one of his masterpieces, Restaurant Los Manantiales in Xochimilco. This evolution of design, from imitation to innovation to inspiration, is an evolution that we see in all of the structural artists that we study. Finally, I want to end this lecture with one of my favorite quotes by Candela. He says that it is always possible to modify the whole or the parts of a design until the ugliness disappears. And this alludes to the idea that design is an iterative process. With design, you have many options. There's not one single solution to an engineering problem or an engineering design. So Candela says, iterate it until you find something elegant. And that ends the lecture on Félix Candela. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join us next time.